Oh yeah. Oh, and there we go. The counter is going, which means hey, we're live. And what's going on? And welcome to Joe's Geek Show, the video series where we talk comics. And welcome to a live stream where we are going to be discussing the upcoming 5G with a bit of speculation and other thoughts that we might have. And joining me today, we have the return of the king, Dark Knight Nation. You can take it away with an intro, sir.
What's going on, guys? Well, I mean, thanks for having me, man. Week is going to be with the first person I ever collaborated with, so I'm real glad to be here. Thanks for having me, man. I guess a little introduction for all the new people, because I mean you've built up your following a lot since I've been around. I am Trevor from the channel DarkKnightNation. It is a one-man operation where I attempt to break down, analyze, and discuss all of the things that are used by the creators in comics that make them work and some things that don't work. So essentially, as somebody who is aiming to work in the industry at some point, it's just me verbalizing almost an editorial critique and figuring out what makes it work and what is an effective device to tell stories on a couple of different counts. So yeah, we also occasionally go through movies and other things, but primarily comics. That is the love.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, you already know who I am stuff. I just talk about comics and a couple movies from time to time. That's pretty much all I do. No real special breakdowns. I just talk about what I like. And that's reading comics.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, man. Just talking about stuff that you like builds community, So
Oh, absolutely. And I'm definitely glad that you are coming back because let me tell you, this man right here has done some awesome, awesome videos in the past. I mean, he's even got, collaborations with comic book creators over on his page, which you can check out. Like, what are some of the creators that you've done interviews with?
Oh boy, we've done some good ones. We've done Jason Fabic, who is an all-star artist that you rarely get to see. He's slated to be doing the Three Joker storyline. He did Jeff Johns' Justice League. I had to admit the audio quality was rough because that was like when I was first starting to figure out how to do convention interviews. But if you put headphones on, I think the content of the interview is really great. I've done an interview with Robert Venditti. He's really well known for picking up on Green Lantern after Jeff Johns, and he did amazing work with that. Currently doing Hawkman and Justice League, which is super cool. I've done Brian Edward Hill, who is doing Fallen Angels for the X line at Marvel. He's done Killmonger for Marvel. Currently doing Batman and the Outsiders for DC. I've done Jonathan Galapian, who is responsible for these commissions here, who is Greg Capullo's inker. And that was a very special one because I feel like inkers don't typically get the highlight that they deserve. And I think it's really common because there's no initiative on the publisher's behalf to like educate people on the importance of anybody besides the writer and the penciler. So that was really cool. Oh, and Liam Sharp, of course, superstar artist currently doing the Green Lantern with Grant Morrison, was one half of Greg Rucka's Rebirth Wonder Woman run. So we've had some really, really fun conversations.
Oh man, dude, just hearing that, I'm super jealous. I've always wanted to get into a nice interview with a comic creator. Like, you are the jealousy of me and probably many other creators that have asked so many times on Twitter, but never ever get a response. So that's just super, super awesome. But yeah, so we are here to talk about the upcoming 5G timeline. We've heard a couple like little bits here and there about what it's going to entail. And hey, Comic Boom, he's in the chat. Hey,
there he is.
What's going on, buddy? We're gonna have to get you in one at some point too. But yeah, I figured we should start off with a little bit of a conspiracy theory surrounding the 5G because AT&T purchased Time Warner and is now the owner of DC, and we know that they're going to be rolling out 5G, full 5G on phones soon. So 5G timeline. There we go. Conspiracy theory.
Internet search algorithms, baby. You got to know how to work the market.
Exactly. So get ready to see a lot of probably ads for cell phones in upcoming comic books once that rolls out. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead now and get into the actual discussion. So, Dark Knight, since you are the guest, let's start with you and your initial thoughts, like when you first heard about the 5G.
Okay. Well, I guess like one brief thing we can give the audience for anybody who might be out of the loop. Essentially, DC 5G is DC doing Marvel in a way that like they're trying to create a sliding timeline in where pretty much everything that's happened in the main DC universe has actually occurred in continuity, you know? So they're essentially trying to say, like, back in 1938, Superman appeared, 1939, Batman appeared, and kind of move things on from then. Which I think has some really interesting implications just based on that alone, because we're taking all of these stories that matter in DC continuity and making them actually present in continuity rather than just something somebody will refer to as a part of hyper time or whatever convoluted comic book multiversal theory is out there. Really, what they're doing is Grant Morrisoning things, but probably not as well, because it doesn't seem like they're going to be looking to um I guess adapt it to like modern times, right? Like example, Batman Rest in Peace. They brought in Batman Zur-En-Arrh as kind of this mental safety that Batman put, like a persona if his mind was ever compromised, and that's how we get to Batmite. So, we can, roll them into existing continuity, but kind of justify them under modern terms, which I thought was great. But I guess, that's kind of my long-winded explanation. Upon like the timeline, I think the timeline's a great idea. I think it's a really great way to make all of this story matter in the history of the universe, because DC is all about history and legacy, you know. Um, but some of the speculation from these comic book news sites, which even taken with a grain of salt, they tend to be fairly accurate, gets me a little bit scared. Because it's starting to feel like all new, all different Marvel. And it feels like they're pushing more for headlines than they are for actual story purposes, which is scary to me. Just, I mean, again, being realistic about it, it probably won't last, right? Even if it's good, it probably won't last. DC Rebirth was great. It didn't last. So I can't be too up in arms about it, but it does certainly get me scared for the foreseeable future. So Joe, I don't know if you want to explain or how much you're in on some of like the speculation that's going down, but for anybody who doesn't know, maybe we want to let them know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, when I first heard about the 5G timeline, like I mean, I like the idea of a centralized timeline, kind of like where everything happens. And we were getting little bits and explanations there, even the mention of the 5G during Doomsday Clock issue 12 there, right at the end. And as far as from what we're hearing and what we're understanding, like you said, it sounds like they're doing a bit of an all new, all different Marvel kind of thing in regards to taking some of the legacy characters, moving them out of the spotlight, and putting someone else within those spots, such as Luke Fox moving into the mantle of Batman. We've heard that Captain Boomerang's son is slated to become the new Flash. John Kent, as an adult, is going to take over his father's position as Superman, and then, of course, moving certain characters around, like making Wonder Woman the first superhero to be seen in the DC universe, as opposed to, say, Superman, from 1938.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the thing that gets me about this whole initiative is that DC has, and like DC has a slew of incredible legacy characters.
Absolutely.
We followed their development and watched them grow, and they still have plenty more to grow. And yet they're introducing these new characters, which there's nothing wrong with introducing new characters. That's how
no, of course not. Of course not.
grows. but we're totally skipping over the second generation, the third generation, fourth generation, and fifth generation. I mean, just looking at Luke Fox, there are like 7 other members of the Bat family that are ahead of him to take that mantle that we could explore. I mean, I don't mind the idea of taking a step away from the mainline heroes we're all familiar with and giving their side chicks. Oh God.
Well,
And
Batman's
giving,
got a lot of side chicks, I'm sure.
yeah, and giving their sidekicks a chance to move forward. I mean, like, I would be so interested if somebody came up with an inspired idea for a DC universe where the first generation is retired and it's been stepped down to like Dick Grayson and like Donna Troy and Roy Harper, Tempest, Wally West. Like, that would be an incredibly inspired and idea that it also would have predication to it, right? Like, it would make a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Because these characters have fans, they have room to grow. And we haven't seen a lot of those characters for a prolonged period of time take up the mantle of their predecessor and figure out what that means to them, except for maybe Dick Grayson and Wally West. But there's so much opportunity there, you know? And yet it feels like they're creating all of these new characters, John and Luke Fox excluded because they had prior purposes, to catch headlines. I mean, and mind you, I don't, for example, again, I'll bring in Luke Fox. I don't mind the Black Batman. I don't. I really don't. I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with it. But you can tell that there's no story reason to make Luke Fox Batman. What's the reason that you could possibly say, let's skip over Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, Damian Wayne, Cassandra Cain, Barbara Gordon, like all of these great legacy characters, even Duke Thomas, because he's more involved with the Bat family as of present than Luke Fox has been.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where does this come from? Like, and I'm sure that there's some incredible writer that is way beyond me that would have some great idea and some great rationale to make Luke Fox Batman. But to be honest with you, the current state of DC, I do not trust. And so, with that being said, what could possibly be the impetus behind Luke Fox being Batman? The headlines of a Black Batman. Which, again, if you're not doing it for story reasons, it's not going to work. I mean, the reason DC Rebirth worked so well was because we had story reasons to make everything happen. We wanted to redevelop these characters and kind of move them forward from the state that the New 52 had left them at. You know, it was a great way to consolidate prior continuity with the New 52 continuity. Because if you took one away, somebody would have felt gypped, the new fans, the old fans. And I want to bring something up regarding Rebirth. Comic Boom in the chat says, obviously, it will only last as long as stories are good. Rebirth didn't last.
That's true.
The stories were largely great. And if you notice, when Rebirth started going downhill was when they strayed away from it. It was when Bendis hopped on Superman. It was around that time that Rebirth started. So what does that tell you? I mean, like, and I see a lot of chatter online about it too, is like, the fans reacted so well to Rebirth and the premise of bringing love back into the DC universe and legacy while also being able to tell those serious stories. And then DC's like, nope. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be like the decision is going to be based on the quality of story or sales, because DC Rebirth was selling. I mean, for me personally, when DC Rebirth launched, I was buying almost everything DC was putting out. Like, DC Rebirth made me care about characters that I really had no regard for. So what does that say about this going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said headlines. It's really all about the headlines. And when you look at when Marvel was doing the all new, all Marvel initiative, when they were taking those characters and replacing the legacy characters with newer characters or other characters that have kind of been there, but, you know, were also, you know, not really pushed to the front and kind of putting them in those roles. I mean, for the most part, that was something that, you know, sure, got a lot of traction, but relatively hurt sales because the biggest reason, and you had stated it, there was no real story, like there's really no fundamental reason for doing so outside of like, maybe we had been talking about earlier saying like Jason Aaron's Thor run where, put Jane Foster in there. There was like he had an overarching story behind that, but a lot of those other characters that were pushed into those roles did not. And I think that there's going to be, from what I'm reading so far, until we see more, a lot of that going on here with the 5G timeline. Because as you said, I mean, until we read it, we don't know. So we're left to assume that Luke Fox is going to be Batman because, like you said, oh, hey, Black Batman, boom, that's a headline. And also, hey, the son of Superman is going to be the new Superman, so they can write articles and articles about that stuff too. You got the Flash with, again, Captain Boomerang's son apparently stepping into that role rather than, say, bringing Wally West back to the forefront.
Or other Wally West, because there's fucking 2 of them.
Yeah, exactly. You got 2 different Wally West. One that's already been the Flash for 20 plus years, and then you got Wallace West that came out in the New 52 that also really deserves a chance to step into that role, especially, in Joshua Williamson's run, whenever he's been in the book, it's really been about his relationship to Barry and, how he's kind of, he looks at the Flash as that mentor, but then he has that confliction with Barry, especially after he finds out what happened, in the New 52 with Danny West, his dad. Mm-hmm. And, I think there's a lot of good story potential there, putting him in the boots of the Flash, main Flash, rather than just making up a new character off the cuff, which is like what they're going to be doing here.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of really odd choices that they're making. I mean, even just doing dead-on comparisons, how do you make John Kent Superman and not make Damian Wayne Batman? I mean, they are the same generation.
Like, Super Son!
If we are making literal comparisons on generation, even if you want to skip the Dick Graysons and the Tim Drakes generations, like, okay, we're going to go for direct lineage, and that's fine.
Right.
Also, Damian Wayne is Middle Eastern. So if you want your headline, even if you want your headline, Damian Wayne is a perfectly viable option to make the next Batman. But just aside from that, I mean, these characters, I'm mind boggled by the direction that DC's been taking. I mean, Tevye Smolka in the chat brings up them making Wally West Dr. Manhattan. That is exactly what scared me about Doomsday Clock. Because,
yes.
I mean, Doomsday Clock was fantastic. And the only person in comics right now that I would trust to handle Watchmen in a respectful way is Jeff Johns, and he did it. And the thing that scared me about it was somebody else, like Scott Lobdell, coming along and literally pissing all over it.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard about, like, because when it comes to Flash Forward, I've actually really been enjoying the story as a whole. But then when I heard about him, not only was I reading the headlines about him becoming Dr. Manhattan, but the first Dr. Manhattan, which kind of makes me think, well, if he's supposed to be the first Dr. Manhattan, then how is Dr. Manhattan happen for Watchmen? So like you were saying, there is a little bit of fear there, and I'm curious to see how that's going to be handled, because if they're suggesting what I think they might be suggesting, just based on that headline about maybe Wally West Dr. Manhattan being responsible for creating Watchmen Dr. Manhattan in some regard, that might be just going a little too far.
Unnecessary. Like,
yeah. What's the point?
I mean, aside from the fact that most Watchmen adaptations don't work, I don't really trust. I mean, even anybody kind of playing in that sandbox, which like 9 times out of 10 has not worked. I mean, look at before Watchmen, and the fact that DC editorial, when they're active, they constrain their creators, but when they're not, they don't. But otherwise, they don't do anything. Like they're not finding the happy medium and doing what an editor should do. I mean, I have it on pretty good authority. I mean, I feel like it's evident based on what we're seeing, but they're letting big writers run the ship and do what they want to do. They're not letting, they have too many architects designing the same building, which doesn't work. I mean, if you look at DC in recent years, active at once, making big universe-wide changes. Bendis, Snyder, King, Jeff Johns, Doomsday Clock. Am I missing anybody? Like 4 people. You want to have 4 distinct visions for your universe running at one time? That in and of itself is terrible because you don't have any consensus. And while it's important to have different tonalities and different genres of books in your line, there should be a consensus to some degree line wide of what's going to be going on and what is going to be that kind of defining factor that's going to cross over between a lot of these mainline titles. That's a huge issue. Aside from the fact that I personally don't like anybody's vision of the DC universe besides Jeff Johns, based on what we'd seen. I mean,
Fair enough.
King like to make it very apparent that superheroes don't work even in their own universe. Right? Bendis has no idea what the DC universe represents, what it stands for, what its history is, and why it's important. Scott Snyder is just at the point in his career where he feels like he doesn't need to justify himself to anybody. And he can just do all this crazy stuff and it's theme over story, which this isn't a theme-telling industry. It's a storytelling industry. And then you have Jeff Johns, who, for whatever reason, is bogged down by time constraints, editorial control. Maybe, somebody is upset that he stepped down from his more executive role. I don't know. But if anybody's running the universe, personally, I'd want it to be Jeff Johns.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it reeks of corporate intervention, which is to be expected on some fronts. But, DC, I think their biggest issue is that editorial just isn't paying attention. And they're not on their game. I mean...
Well, because I think it also has a lot to do with, like you also said, big writers. You look at Bendis. Bendis has a lot of pull, and like essentially he's got that, time in the industry where he can kind of throw his weight around a little bit. So even if an editor wanted to challenge him, he probably has enough weight to throw around to be able to say, well, no, I want to do this. And it kind of showed, in his Superman, just from his opening Superman stories about all of these crazy giant changes that he made with like the character Rogol Zar apparently being the one that destroyed Krypton and all that. And of course, the way he, the way he writes Lois Lane for one. Jesus, I can't even get into that one without going started. Yeah, I don't even want to go into that. But then, like doing things like moving the Fortress of Solitude and then this and that. And then just all these, small details that have extreme impact and consequences, on the bigger, DC universe. And, again, it's, I'm not sure if it's completely editors not willing to do their job or as much as with some of these writers just being challenged and they're backing down from it, because like you said, it just really seems like there seems to be no consensus about what this current universe should be. Whereas Rebirth, there was a definite direction.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different issues. One, I think that DC is valuing. I mean, it's great to value your writers and your creators. Don't get me wrong, but right, an editor is there for a reason. And you look at editors at DC. I mean, really, who's been there through good times? I mean, you have Mark Doyle, and that's it. He's the only editor that comes to mind at DC right now that has been a large part of critically acclaimed and financially successful eras in DC Comics. Not even just eras, even lines to a degree, right? That there's an issue in and of itself, because that means that they're not holding on to good editors. And based on what I can only observe, they're hiring either these really young editors that don't quite know what it means to be an editor in comics versus an editor in maybe say prose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's not something you can learn, right? I mean, let me correct that statement. It's not something that is often taught publicly. Editing comics is
Right.
an entirely different beast than editing prose.
Mm-hmm.
It's an entirely different medium. I mean, it's like film and prose combined.
Yeah, that's
Attached
true.
to its very kind of particular periodical schedule.
Oh yeah.
And something I want to rope in is, Tevye says there's no editorial control over there at DC Comics. They need to fire Dan DiDio. I mean, I don't know if it's DiDio. DiDio's also been there during some pretty decent times at DC. I'm not in the offices. But the issue is when there is editorial control at DC, they're overbearing. I mean, it is very clear, very, very clear that whatever is happening right now at DC, besides Scott Snyder going off and doing his death metal, they're not letting creators push the envelope, right? Like all of these stories feel very filler until whatever the next initiative is, which is a little bit disappointing because there's stuff like Rob Venditti's Green Justice League, which I would like to give him the opportunity to sculpt part of the universe. But
Absolutely.
I know it doesn't mean anything because they're just going to be setting up for 5G and they're going to get somebody else on there. So I think there is editorial control, but not in the right places and not to the right degrees. You know what I mean? I mean, think about it. What's happening in any DC book right now that's going to have massive impact on the universe? I mean, Bendis probably thinks he's doing something, but Legion is going to mean nothing. Nobody cares about it.
That'll probably be canceled in a while anyway.
What's happening in Batman? Nothing. I mean, mind you, I was waiting for Tynion's Batman for literally years, or basically for anybody not King. But I was excited for
Yeah.
What have we gotten in 3 issues? Nothing's really happened. Huge book. What's happening in Superman? Nothing. What's happening in Wonder Woman? Nothing.
Hey, you can't say nothing's happening in Superman, though. Clark Kent revealed his identity.
Oh, God. I mean, sorry. Nothing of substance.
There we go.
And that's an instance where you look at all these other books that don't have massive names attached. They're not letting them do anything. Oh, but Bendis? You want to reveal Superman's identity? Okay, who am I to tell you no? Even though he knows nothing about the universe or the character.
And also something that happened in the New 52 just a couple of years prior.
That's the worst part. We just undid it.
Oh, and don't forget, it was also the same title.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm not even focused on the title. We just undid this. Like, we are literally taking Rebirth, the thing that everybody loved, and have proven they've loved it because sales were great.
Tomasi and Gleason's run was awesome, by the way. You should totally check it out.
I mean, like, even books like Green Arrow Rebirth was the number one, like Green Arrow Rebirth #1 was the #1 selling Green Arrow book of all time.
Yeah, I totally got that one too.
In a time and place where people aren't buying the same quantities of comics as they were even 10, 15 years ago, which is huge. Huge. I admire change because the comic book industry is often an industry that doesn't change for the better often, but it has to be motivated by story reasons, by reasons for the character. These moves just feel very uninspired, which is what kills me. Like I said, if you want to chop the responsibility up to a newer generation, I'm cool with that, man. I love me some Bruce Wayne Batman, love me some Diana Prince Wonder Woman, love me some Clark Kent Superman, but they've been around for 80 years and they'll be back. So let's do something fresh and new that is inspired by story. The reason Jason Aaron's Jane Foster Thor worked was because it was inspired by story. It had things to say about not only the Marvel universe, but our actual real world. It had implications to the character of Thor. It took him on a journey, Odinson. It took Jane Foster and proved her value as a character in the Marvel Universe.
Mhm.
It had a countless number of reasons to bring it into effect. And that's why it was good. I mean, the worst part is, and the thing that kills me, and I hope this isn't the case, because again, this is just speculation. We don't have 100% of the billing as to what's going to be going on. But if this is all new, all different Marvel, I mean, I understand copying from the other publisher. It happens all the time.
Absolutely.
Why would you not copy something successful? That's what gets me.
Yeah, I mean, with like I had stated, we were talking about previously, it's like all new, all different Marvel was, there's no other word for it. It was a crapshoot. It was meant to spark conversation, and it ended up really doing nothing. Just made people stop buying Marvel for quite a while.
I mean,
so it's kind of like, what is DC's main objective?
Yeah, I mean,
with wanting to do this.
Look at what actually stuck. And what people generally, as an audience, as a general comic book reading audience, enjoyed. Jane Foster Thor. Kamala Khan stuck. And that's it. From that era. Why did they stick? We talked about Jane Foster. What did Kamala Khan do? Didn't disrespect the prior holder of the mantle. We actually took Carol Danvers, the original Miss Marvel, and moved her up to a higher platform and gave Kamala Khan a new platform for herself. And it didn't feel forced. There was a story reason for it. We created a character that has broadened it, that has assumed an audience and has even brought in an entirely new audience of people to represent, which is incredible. And those are the types of kind of action plans that the publishers need to take note of. Why did this work?
Yes.
It's not inherently because they did a thing and introduced a new character, but they had reasons for it and they had a plan for it. Tevye brings up Laura. I mean, Laura Kinney's existed for a while in the Marvel Universe, but was brought to prominence after. Why did it work? They had a story reason. They also put a writer on it who cares. Not a writer who's on it to snap up headlines and be like, I'm writing this Batman or this Superman or the whatever. There was a writer with a plan who cared about these new characters that felt like they had a vision. And that's the issue. Nobody is writing with vision. You know what I mean? Like my big issue is that things at DC in particular right now are starting to feel really cookie cutter. Like they seem really okay with kind of having this stagnant way of doing things. And that's not okay. That's not how the industry survives. Right? There are a certain set of things, and it may vary depending on who you talk to, but there are a certain set of things that would require you to respect a legacy, which is really important. But if we stick to the same thing all the time, the same tone, the same way of telling these stories, we'll never grow. Look at what happened when Vertigo came onto the scene. Vertigo Comics was one of the most incredible things to happen to the industry. Why? Because it told the world that comic book reading audiences can pick up real works of fiction within comic book pages, real works of literature. And then we've gotten to points even prior to that with like The Dark Knight Returns and The Watchmen that'll take even the superhero genre and tell those types of stories. And we've gotten it after, right? There are different books for everybody. I mean, not everybody's looking to read freaking high works of literature and comics, and I respect that. But
it doesn't mean it can't happen.
Yeah. And the thing is, nobody's pushing to do that. It feels like everybody's doing these cookie cutter stories. I mean, again, I like James Tynion. I wanted him on Batman. His story feels very cookie cutter. There's nothing new going on. There's really nothing new going on.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. You know, because like, and forget, you know, just kind of sum it up. You know, some of your thoughts the way I'm understanding it. You know, it's like from what you're saying is things we need in the industry to continue to push it forward. We need vision, consistent vision of some, you know, of a good story, and natural progression rather than forcing characters to be in certain spots, which is what a lot of writers like to do. AKA, you know, you had like, you know, Tom King and Bendis, you know, twisting and turning the character to fit what they think their vision of the character was.
Right.
And then, of course, innovation, such as with Vertigo, actually showing people that, hey, you can take us seriously as actual like literature in a way, because I believe it was what Neil Gaiman's Sandman actually was up for an award or won an award.
Oh, dude, Neil Gaiman has won the World.
Yeah, he's won.
Award.
Yeah,
It is
exactly.
literally the highest honor of any fictional work out in the world. It was such such a huge pivotal moment for storytelling that
Absolutely.
they banned comics the following year or maybe a couple of years from even being an option to receive the award. That's how big it was. And I don't expect Sandmans from everybody, but it doesn't feel like we're in a point in time in comics where these things can happen with pre-existing characters. I mean, I'll give them some credit. I think the Joe Hill horror line of Black Label, great idea. Great idea. Give people genre fiction in comic books that are legitimate in a sense that there are people with innovation tied into their vision and a knack for storytelling. It makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely something we need, which is nice to see. I mean, I haven't read anything in the Joe Hill line. Have you?
Yeah, I mean, I started like Basket Full of Heads and Dollhouse. And the ideas are incredible. I mean, they are fantastic works of fiction that I think in particular, like Basket Full of Heads, that wouldn't work in any other medium but comics, right? Like they're taking advantage of this art form's particular, I don't want to say constraints, but its opportunities, and telling some actual, and I don't even want to say serious, because you can tell stories that are lighter in tone that are also kind of, you know, serious fiction. You know what I mean? Like it takes itself seriously as a story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have things like The Last God by Philip Kennedy Johnson. It is a classic fantasy story told within a comic book, and they're able to make that transition from like a prose style story into comic books and make that work. So they're pushing those types of boundaries, and I appreciate that, but I'd like to see that in the main line as well. I mean, these characters are so iconic and they are so prevalent and almost pretty much everlasting because of what they can stand for. So why aren't we pushing those characters into stories that can really show that, right? I mean, there's always, and the worst part is for me, I feel like DC right now, for the most part, is telling stories to the lowest common denominator, which, like, you're setting these initiatives with all these different lines, with the children's line and the young adult line, and then, you know, we're getting into the main line and then Black Label. Make that delineation clear as to what's going to be in each line, right? So that we know what we're getting into. I mean, when I'm reading mainline DC, I don't expect hokey, outdated dialogue from the 60s or 70s when comic books were aimed at children. And yet we get that, and people seem to be okay with it as if, you know, oh, it's just comics. Comics won't grow if you remain comfortable and content with stagnancy, right? I mean, and
so do you kind of feel like maybe with the way DC's kind of going along their lines right now, you know, you had even stated previously, maybe even just kind of halting everything just to get to the 5G timeline. Like, do you feel like we kind of took steps back in the industry where people just don't look at comic books as seriously?
Well, I mean, the thing is that I get that there has to be a marketability, right? Ultimately, it's a product.
Right.
I mean,
we got to sell the product, obviously.
Can't continue if they're not making money. But there should be a compromise
Hmm.
to making money and telling good stories. I mean, there are stories that I don't particularly love that I can admire for craftsmanship, right? Like every story doesn't have to be for everybody. Every story doesn't have to be for me, and I can appreciate that. But to that same token, to that same degree, we need to have stories that people are going to care about, and not just because a character that they love is in it, right? Like I didn't like Tom King's Batman, even though Batman is my guy, literally my guy, right? I couldn't stick on that book no matter how much I loved the character, and it seems that a lot of people are so loyal to characters that they're resigned to reading and interacting in runs with runs just because it has their favorite character in that. And
Yeah,
I think that level of complacency won't let the medium grow. It's great to love a character, but if I think a lot of the time people are afraid to admit that something that their favorite characters are in isn't good, and even afraid to like drop the book if it's something they don't like because they're afraid to not collect their favorite characters issue this through this, or they're afraid to miss something in the continuity. And I get that. I was like that for a very long time. I
yeah,
think, largely the audience, if they disapprove of something, they need to stop buying it because we speak with our money, right?
absolutely. And sometimes I kind of look at it from the viewpoint of, say, politics, for example. You have those people that are so set on their side that even if their person visually is not the best representation uh, of what they need, that it doesn't matter. They're still going to go for it. Kind of like in comics, like you're saying, you love Batman so much. And it's like, I'm going to stick with him through thick and thin. And even when he's at his worst, I'm going to continue to give them my money and signaling that I will always stick by this particular character rather than, say, hopping on over to, let's say, Robert Venditti's Hawkman, a book that I kept hearing was extremely well done. I mean, even when it came to Tom King's Batman, it took me 12 issues, but after that, I was just done.
Dude, I mean, I was part of the problem. I was buying Tom King's Batman for like 56 issues. Mind you, I liked the first arc or two. And then 3 was like meh. And it started to have really mixed things for me. But I bought it for way too long because I was one of those people that wasn't willing to compromise. But then I realized, why am I telling DC that this is okay? If
Oh
I don't
yeah.
like it, right? Because no matter how much I moan about it on Twitter or on YouTube or whatever, they won't care because I'm still giving them, when it was double ship, $8 a month for Batman.
Yeah, exactly. And like in recent months and stuff like that, even on, say, our Facebook pages and stuff like that, you've definitely become a big advocator for, if it's not good, don't support it.
Right. And the thing is that there's something to be said about the power of the bond that people have with these characters and what they mean for them.
Hmm.
Seriously, it's incredible. It's what keeps this industry going. But if you're buying a book just because your character's in it and you don't like it, you're telling DC that you're okay with the direction that this is going in. And not even like a signal that you're telling them it's okay. You are literally paying them for it. You are literally like, okay, here's my money. Like they don't care if you like it or not, you're getting the money. And ultimately that decision is going to be fueled on the fact that you're still funding it. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
I haven't been reading comic books for that long. I've probably been reading comic books for 5, maybe 6 years.
Oh wow, you are a baby.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you do know what you're talking about to a degree, because
I did
I've
the
seen you
opposite.
dissect stories in very good ways.
Thank
You know,
you. I've done the opposite of most people, where like people read them as kids, maybe took a break as a teenager and then went back to it, or even read them straight through. I found it when I was like 16.
oh wow, yeah.
Um,
See, I picked up my first comic book when I was about 6.
yeah.
and
No,
just kept going from there.
I never really had that. I mean, I've always loved Batman as like a figure, but I never got into comics. But basically, where I'm going with this is I, even being so kind of relatively early into my comic book reading career, I have become trigger happy at canceling books if I am the least bit unsatisfied. Because I've realized that if I keep buying this book and I don't like it, they're just going to keep doing the same thing.
Oh yeah, and the best analogy that I can possibly think of is, boy, well, I better stick by my character even though the book is awful. So it's kind of like the industry is smacking you in the face, but here's my money. Come back next month, smack you in the face, here's my money. And it's just really, it comes to a point when you got to say, is it enough? Have I had enough? And like you said, it took you about 56 issues before you decided, okay, I've had enough.
And even for the completionist, the one thing that I thought about after is it benefits you in twofold. One, you cannot buy a current book and you're sending that message. Two, you can always go back to dollar bins a year or two later and find most of the books you didn't contribute to the direct market for.
Oh yeah, I mean, even now I find old, Batman or Superman or whatever character like Rebirth, New 52, not just in the dollar bins, but our local comic book store even every so often does like 50-cent days where you can just like pick them up for just $2 a piece, and it's the quality is not always the best because they're just stuffed in a box, but at the same time, it's like if
you're reading copies,
yeah, exactly, and if you care about completing a run, that's a way to do it, or
right.
If it's or even heck, what is it, used trade paperbacks at used stores.
Well, the thing about trade paperbacks is it'll still, because they are kind of a backlog type of method for sales, they'd still kind of contribute to the market in a way. The thing about buying old floppies, after like the kind of range of print is out, is that even though you're buying them from comic book shops, they're not going to be ordering like new prints of the issue a year or two after, right? Like if, for example, Batman 75, right? It's been more than half a year even since that come out. Just about, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. If I were to go and buy the issue now, it wouldn't be telling DC that I'm okay with it and that I like this direction. You want to know why? Because even though I'm buying that off the shelf, my local comic book store isn't going to Diamond saying, hey, I need to pick up a new copy to fill that shelf space, because it's dead weight at that point. So you, first of all, don't have to compromise that kind of collector's mentality, and you save money. You save a lot of money. So even if you've gotten yourself to that point, you can still send that message to the direct market, right? Because the direct market is really what fuels comic book sales. It's how you most immediately tell the industry and the publishers what you want, what you don't want. So you can always, I'm not saying you can't buy those things if you're curious or if you're the collector, but knowing when to buy them, and it will profit you in the long run because you're saving up to like, I mean, really, dollar bins are
hundreds of dollars in the long run. When you look at the current state of comics, anywhere from $3.99 starting and then going up from there, unless you're going straight up indie, where, I think alternative comics is actually like buck something or something like that.
Well, I mean, look at again, we'll use Tom King's Batman.
Yeah.
I can't tell you, I can't give you more than maybe a handful of issues of Tom King's Batman that have matured in value. I guarantee you that most of those issues you can go into discount long boxes at your LCS and find for less than it was going for at cover price.
Absolutely.
So if you're not interested in the material, why would you contribute to the direct market? I mean, I dropped Wonder Woman pretty short after James Robinson's run. You know what I mean? Because I didn't like the direction. I mean, again, I guess Batman is a popular figure, and Tom King's Batman, by the end, it was only selling around 60,000 copies.
Mhm.
Batman, for many years, on average, would not sell below 100,000 copies. I don't think there's a single issue, even at its lowest point, that Scott Snyder's Batman sold under 100,000 copies. And Tom King's Batman, at its culmination, at its peak, I mean,
Mhm.
not peak, at its culmination to the huge storyline, was selling about half.
Yeah, and then after a certain point, like I remember when the headlines came out because it was a big deal. Where what is it? Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk started out selling Batman.
Dude, I mean, I mean, Immortal Hulk is incredible. It has been one of the best big two books of the last forever and a half.
Mm-hmm. Oh
But
yeah, I mean, it definitely deserved it.
in
But
no
for the fact
world,
that it was beating a Batman book, that
not
was a big
not even
deal.
a Batman book, the
But the
Batman.
Batman book, yes.
It is DC's staple book,
Mm-hmm.
which is insane. I mean, that's a testament to the quality of Immortal Hulk, but that also says like the discrepancy was so incredible to make that happen. But I guess we might have kind of meandered into grievances with DC's kind of past. Getting back into 5G.
Yes.
I think that there are a lot of great things that could come with the consolidation of the timeline.
Absolutely.
But based on these reports, and again, maybe they are just reports, maybe it's all BS, or maybe it's one of those things where the comic book industry has heard that the general audience is pretty much ranking on it across the board and switches at last minute. I don't know. But sorry, I lost my train of thought. The big thing for me is that
I can start wrapping it up a little bit.
Sorry, train of thought totally squandered.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Wife's coming down too.
Huh?
Yeah, no, sorry about that. It's like I wasn't. Wife was coming downstairs and he was kind of like giving me give me the signal a little bit, So it's like usually I have time limits, family, all that fun stuff. But yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. No, I was like in the middle of like losing my train of thought.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get it back. Let's get it back online. Okay. So one of the other things that I was reading about with the 5G, I don't know if you heard about this. I mean, you may have like when reading some of the articles, is that while the main titles of the books are going to have, the Luke Fox Batman, John Kent Superman, blah, 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 all that fun stuff, is that we're also still going to be getting, the Bruce Wayne Batman and Barry Allen Flash books as prestige format $8 books. I don't know if you had heard that.
I just like that business practice. It's like, hey, the thing that you really want and love, we're just going to put it over here and charge you double the price.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be, because from what I was reading, is that the idea is that they're meant to be prestige format books, not the huge ones, but like, the smaller one, kind of like, what was it, Last Night on Earth, from what I was understanding, is that, they're supposed to be like, double the pages, no ads and all that stuff. But it almost like, one person I was talking to said that was almost kind of like holding legacy characters hostage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're holding the originals completely hostage, and for me, it feels like, okay, so Black Label is going to be publishing the actual mainline books, and the mainline books are going to be publishing Elseworlds alternate reality stories. Okay, I mean that's really what it feels like.
Yeah, it's what it sounds like to me too.
Which,
so I thought it was kind of weird.
Mind you, I'll give things a try.
Absolutely.
If there are creative teams on some of these books that can take the circumstances and run with it, as at least one or two or a few will inevitably do, because there's always a diamond in the rough. I'm okay with that. And I'll read those books. I won't completely I won't bark before it comes home. I won't start barking before the mailman knocks on the door.
Yeah, I mean, I will always give things a try first, no matter how they sound, it's always good to at least test the waters, because who for all we know, like we were stating earlier, that even though there may not be story reasons for a lot of these changes, maybe behind the scenes there could be, and we could be surprised.
Right. And again, I think that kind of ushering in this new generation of DC characters is a great idea. But the thing that just gets me is again, you have this vast library of incredible legacy characters that you could already use and that people already care about. And that, to that degree, because they've already built fan bases, it'll show the potential for them to grow, right? Like, people like them. So why can't we introduce them to people that don't know about them and get them to like them? And there's also just the predication of history, right? Like, we're consolidating a timeline. We're saying everything has happened
Right.
all of the Earth Prime stories have happened. Why not start from then on? Why skip so many generations of incredible characters? It just feels like a waste to me. And again, what rational motivation besides getting 5G out there for internet search algorithms, for AT&T selling their cellular plan, what reason do we have to skip over those generations?
And also, are we actually going to ever see those generations?
Right.
If we're going straight to 5G, and like we're always, and that's one of the biggest. It's one of my biggest points of contention is, my brain starts working on the what if scenarios.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even thinking like, what if? I can't find it in me to believe that there is an actual feasible reason to do what these rumors are suggesting. To skip these generations, to introduce these new characters that nobody knows or really cares about for the most part, to take over these mantles, right? Like, what? And you know what? If I'm wrong, and there's this grand, elaborate story and character reason to do this,
well, then we'll just do another stream saying it's great.
Well, then, I mean, yeah, I'll give credit where credit is due, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope to God I am wrong, because I've been largely dissatisfied with DC Comics for about a year now, in terms of their mainline, and I'll admit it. But I just, for as much as I've tried, I can't think of what good could possibly come out of it. Really. Hopefully somebody smarter than me airs their thoughts out in the comments and convinces me otherwise. Because I'd like to feel excited for something at DC Comics right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure in the back of all our minds, we're just hoping that, Jeff Johns come out of the woodwork and was like, it was all my plan.
Dude, I mean, the thing about Rebirth, quick tangent, is that, like, it as I became a person who was a legacy fan, right? As I went back and read back issues and started to uncover these characters' histories, I was like, oh my God, he like legitimately found a way to make all of the bad that came out of the New 52 totally worth it, and yet not punish the good things that came out of the New 52. It was genius.
Absolutely.
And I think that the issue with DC right now, in particular, their mainline books, is that they have I guess, I don't want to call them good old boys, but they have like this group of people that they're letting take total control of everything. Whereas we should be letting these big writers usher in these young, hungry artists who have been a fan of these books, these characters, this industry for a majority of their lives, or even parts of their lives, to tell their stories and their interpretations. Look at how Marvel has pretty much, like, lightning has struck with Donny Cates.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They took a hungry, talented, independent comic book creator who has vision and who loves comic books and let him do what he does.
Oh yeah, I mean, just looking at what he's done over at Marvel, I mean, that speaks for itself. Whether you're looking at Thanos, Venom, heck, the new Thor book, Jesus Christ! I mean, from issue 1, I was just like, this dude knows what the fuck he's doing, and it's
And
amazing.
the worst part, or not even the best part, was I was so adamant when Venom came out and everybody was I was like, no way. It's bullshit. Because people buy Venom for at least a while because it's Venom and it's a spectacle.
Right.
I was like, there's no fucking way. And I started reading Donny Cates' Venom. I was like, oh my God, I'm eating my words. That was a situation where I was eating my own words. And
Mind
that's
blown.
fantastic. But look at what's happening there.
Mm-hmm.
They're letting him kind of take those reins. Like, we need more of that. I mean, you have people who are like telling these stories in the Hill House comics, or even Philip Kennedy Johnson, who's relatively kind of been under the radar in the industry, telling his Last God story. Take people like that,
Mm-hmm.
that love these characters and want to do respect by them and tell their stories. I mean, look at what Scott Snyder was when he first came into the industry. He was a talented writer who had something to say, who had a love for the characters. And now, I mean, like, he's kind of, unfortunately,
Well, he became a name.
well, he became a name, and he's coalesced into a very particular style of writing that, because he's built it, people praised anyways, even though it wasn't like great. Like, he's very much like, I want to tell a story about a theme, which all writers do. But the story's going to come second, and I'm also going to explicitly tell you exactly what the theme is. And everything else is going to be sacrificed at that expense. And I'll be the first to tell you about how excited I was for him taking over Justice League.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning,
I physically cannot give you more than 2 issues of that 39, if you want to count annuals, 40 or 41 issue series that I loved. Out of that many issues, 2, that's 1 out of 20. That's 5%. That's a 5% success rate in my eyes. One of my favorite writers came onto a book that should be a pillar of the DC universe. It hasn't been in a long time. And told stories that were convoluted, that were, again, theme heavy over story, over character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to look at, the industry has to be willing to let go of those people and give these new voices a chance. Because, again, they start to get complacent. I mean, I think Scott Snyder has stories he wants to tell, but I don't think they're fresh anymore. But look at, like, the Bendises. He hasn't had an inspired idea in like a decade. Let's be real.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll be honest. Like, first time I ever picked up Bendis, God, back in the early 2000s, I loved what he was doing on a lot of those books, and it was just weird to just kind of watch a writer you love just sort of devolve over the years as they become increasingly more popular. They're just given more control over the work. And, eventually you work your way up to what he's doing on Superman, and you're just like shaking your head like, why? Like, why would you do that?
Well, the thing is like, look at his motivations. Look at what he does. All he does now is create new characters that he can be attached to for royalties. That's it. That's all he does. And he tells these stories that he thinks are going to be fun, with these characters that he knows nothing about, that he fails to do the research at, and doesn't have a legitimate desire to push that character forward. I mean, he sacrificed John Kent at the price of doing his stupid Legion book, a character that people, in the short time that he's been around, grew attached to.
I mean, it was definitely one of the best parts. I mean, what Tomasi and Gleason's Superman run did with John Kent as a character, and turning Superman, evolving him, moving him forward as a character to, from just a superhero to a family man. He had to balance it all, being a being Superman, being a husband, being a father. And those really were some of the best stories that came out of recent years.
Well, the glory of watching Clark raise John in the context of being Superman is that it was something that he couldn't solve with his problems. I mean, he couldn't
With his powers, yeah.
with his powers.
We know what
He
you mean.
could not use his powers to be a great dad. And he also has to kind of reconcile the things that he's doing with Superman and how to teach his son to be a good person, right? Like he had to reevaluate everything he was doing. And there was a story reason for doing something new with Superman. There was a reason in terms of the development of the character to make those changes, and they were inspired. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues that we've seen, for example, post Tomasi's Batman and Robin, Bruce Wayne and Damian Wayne's relationship is totally dissolved. I mean, we spent all that time in Tomasi's Batman and Robin run to establish a new dynamic. Batman has an actual kid of his own. He's learned from his mistakes, practically raising all of these orphan boys, and he's going to apply that new knowledge and make mistakes along the way to raising his son. And what happened? He literally got thrown out. Like the first issue, and I know this was part of Rebirth, but the thing that I hated was the first issue of Rebirth Teen Titans was Batman ignoring Damian on his 13th birthday.
Oh, I didn't read that first issue of Teen Titans, but
all of that development in that run. That was my first omnibus right there. It is an incredible run that, again, pushed the character forward with these new inspired ideas that also paid respect and acknowledged the legacy of the character. And
absolutely.
that, again, editors at DC aren't looking at those isolated things and being like, oh, maybe that's something that we should keep kind of consistent throughout the line, right? Like Batman has learned how to be a better father. So maybe if somebody has an idea about, I don't know, making Batman completely ignore his son on his 13th birthday, maybe we should put an X on that. You know? So there are so many things like that out in the universe that DC is not consciously trying to make sure are preserved. And they're deciding to make changes because A, they don't want to lose a creator, or B, they're trying to make a headline. We need these changes. If you're going to make them, we need them to be inspired. And there are things that I think a lot of people can't differentiate between liking and acknowledging are good for a character. You know, and it's hard. But like, I don't expect to like everything coming out of DC Comics. I don't expect everything to be written for me. But I would like to at least know that whatever's being done with the character suits the character. You know?
Oh, absolutely true.
And it's also finding a way to let this character grow. Because comic books are such a circular industry. It's so cyclical. That we've put ourselves stuck in a situation where pretty much no matter what you're doing, you're upsetting somebody. But largely, we haven't allowed ourselves to find compromises for extended period of time where we can appreciate a legacy of the character and allow them to grow at the same time.
Oh, yeah, because characters, you know, at the very end of any kind of major story, anything will always get moved back some notches to kind of, you know, I don't want to say start completely over, but, you know, you do find a lot of similar stories where it's kind of like, well, I mean, this has been done before, but at the same time, it's like, wow, let's do it again. You know, he can learn the same lesson just in, you know, in a different context. Yeah. I guess you could say. But yeah, we're gonna have to start wrapping up here. I'm about out of time.
Yeah, of course.
So if there's what are some final thoughts about 5G? If you could just, you know, summarize everything, or any final.
I hope the speculation's wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. And if they do it, I hope there's a story reason.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, I can't find one. I think that DC needs to start allowing people into the industry that not only love these characters, but also have ideas as to how to let them grow and expand their mythology. And if that means putting, Bruce Wayne down for a second and doing Batman stories with Dick or Tim or Damian or even Jason or Barbara or Cassandra or whatever, that's cool. Let's expand other characters. Let's figure out what these mantles mean, right? Like what the mantle of Batman truly means and how these different characters can interpret it and act on those interpretations. That's fine. I'm more than happy to explore those things because I know that to some capacity, I'll get my Bruce Wayne back, whether it's in a Black Label book, an Elseworld story, or if I'm going back and reading a backlog of incredible stories.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that, again, and I've said it a million times, if we're going to make the changes, they need to be made with respect and with care. And
Make it count.
things aren't going to be perfect, but I feel like largely comic book fans have enough intuition to tell whether or not changes are made with care.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Jeff
as
Johns,
long.
no, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay, okay, okay.
Jeff Johns, when he decided to integrate the Watchmen to some capacity into the DC universe, into the multiverse, I should say, there was a story reason. He had a respectful way in approaching it, to where me, as somebody who thinks that Watchmen is pretty much untouchable, felt comfortable because I knew that at the very least he was doing it out of respect and out of love for those characters, both DC and general DC line and Watchmen, and he was going to do something that he felt was genuinely a great direction. Because even if I didn't like it, I can just ignore it.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
these stories are fiction. People naturally have a headcanon of events, anyways. All I want to know is that these publishers are taking the time, particularly DC right now, to put people on these projects who care and who are capable of telling these stories. And whatever stories they want to tell, that's up to them. I'm not the gatekeeper. But I want to know that they're being done with respect for the legacy and for the future of these characters.
Absolutely. And just kind of touch on that a little bit more. It's like, as long, it's just I don't want to see 5G kind of take the Marvel route to a degree with some of the characters where it's about, tearing down the legacy characters to try to make the characters you want to push seem better. I mean, I hope that we're not going to see a Luke Fox Batman where it's, he's the best Batman ever, and turns out Bruce Wayne was like the worst Batman ever. As long as, like you said, that they are approached with reverence and respect for the past. That's just one of the biggest things that I can say that I would like to see in these books upcoming. Well, and again, like you, I really do hope that they're good, that they're amazing, that there is a reason.
And I hope that they've learned from it. We've had a history of incredible legacy characters that have kind of taken those first steps. I mean, Wally was Flash for a majority of people. Wally was probably your Flash.
Yeah, no, he was my generation's Flash. I mean, you figure, what was it, 85, 87 when he died, when Barry died, and then Wally West. That's over 20 years worth of continuity.
25.
And yeah, and when he, and when Wally West was just kind of like, boom, cast to the side, nowhere to be found, other than the version of Wallace West in the New 52, it was heartbreaking, and then when Rebirth did hit, that scene where Barry pulled Wally from the Speed Force and embraced him, I mean, that right there was enough for me to shed a tear.
Dude, I wasn't even, I was a Barry Allen Flash guy, and that still made me get all watery-eyed. I mean, and look at, I mean, when Grant Morrison really took that leap post Final Crisis and made Dick Batman, you want to know what made Dick great? as Batman was that he wasn't Bruce. They were
Yeah,
letting Dick Grayson assume the role as Dick Grayson. And there were
he was allowed to be his own Batman.
right. And it also paid respect in many ways to Bruce Wayne because they didn't automatically do that thing where in fiction we're like, oh, well, he's going to automatically assume the capabilities and skills. The express reason why Dick Grayson's Batman run was incredible was because he wasn't as good of a Batman as Bruce. And in other
Yes.
ways, he was better than Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
They let him take that role under his own agency. Whether or not he was capable at certain things or not, they showed it. They didn't just make assumptions or they didn't just make convoluted pushes in directions. And I hope that if DC is going to take this leap into generational characters that are kind of flung down the ladder in terms of, I guess, I don't want to say birthright, but you know what I mean? In terms of like who should assume the role based on time. I hope that it's inspired and I hope they have a reason and I hope they make me love it.
Absolutely.
I hope they make me love it, man.
I mean, that's all we can really hope for moving forward, you know, because as soon as 5G hits, it's like, okay, well, we're going to be stuck with it for a while. You know, we know eventually it's going to move back to the status quo, but we're going to be stuck with it for a while. And hopefully, you know, it's good. But with that, I am out of time. And I want to say thank you, Dark Knight, for coming on and having such a good and fun conversation. I have really missed these talks with you and these streams, and I hope we can do more in the future.
Oh, dude, for sure. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be back. It's great to be having these discussions. I know I get super rambly.
Hey, that's fine though. I'm just sitting there, you know, I'm hosting you, you're my guest, and a lot of times, dude, I mean, I love a lot of the things you say, and I love the way you express it, and I can just sit back and kind of be like, all right, cool, he's doing the work for me. I don't have to say anything. It's perfect. It's perfect. So, but with that, I'll go ahead and let you do your outro and all that fun stuff. Go for it, brah.
Well, you know, thanks again, Joey, for having me on. It was great coming back to the YouTube space and having these conversations. Thank you for everybody who is watching us right now, participating in the live chat with their thoughts. Those who are going to comment down below, watching this later. If you guys want to find me, link in the description below. I'll of course be having Joey on, you know, on my channel to have some great conversations like these. Hopefully I won't be so rusty. But it's always an incredible time. And, you know, I look forward to kind of exploring what DC 5G is going to be and maybe coming up with our ways to reconcile some of those changes in the DC universe. So, you know, Joey, thanks for taking the chance and having a rusty old man back hopping on the saddle.
Hey, not a problem, not a problem. Always happy to have you. So everybody, hey, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to his channel. Make sure to follow him on Twitter. Yeah, you just made a Facebook, didn't you? Like, I think was that new or I don't know. I just liked something on Facebook earlier, but
it's not super active. But yeah, if you guys wanna keep up with my shenanigans and my kind of analytical style of approaching comic book reviews, link in the description to my channel. My Twitter is DarkKnightNat25. But if you go to my YouTube channel, there's links up top to all the different social medias. But yeah, we'll definitely be engaging with Joey some more on the YouTube space. We're always back and forth on Twitter. So if you guys want to join us there, make sure you follow Joey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I did leave a link in the description to his channel down below. So make sure to check that out. And with that, well, thank you for watching. Thank you for the engagement. We had a great time, a great conversation. If you like this video, make sure to smash that thumbs up button. Once this is over, share it with some friends so that they can watch this too. Especially if people like live streams. Who doesn't love a good live stream, right? And if you're not subscribed to me, make sure you do so. And we will catch you in the next video where we will talk more comics. All right, take care, have a great day, and as always, stay geeky.